So I'm going to go over to Piskel. You can download the app and use it on your computer, but you don't really need to do that. You can use it online as well. The only thing to be careful about is if you use it online, it doesn't save your files in the cloud. So it's sort of like the other programs we've used, like Twine and Bitsy. You need to make sure to save your files, if you want to use them again later. It will save it locally as you're working. So if you're working on the same computer in the same browser, it'll still be there. But if you want to, save it somewhere else, that's a good idea. It is very easy to import things that you've exported. So I'll go over that as well. But let's just get started. So I'm just going to click Create a Sprite. And I'll go over some of the basic settings. And then I'm just going to do two things. I'm going to draw some scenery. And then I'm going to draw a really, really simple main character, sort of player character. Okay, so getting started, one thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you have a good size. The default is 32 by 32 pixels. This is pretty small. So when you're making your main character, you may want it to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger. I'm going to click on maintain aspect ratio. So I do want it to be square. We always want our game art, for the most part, to be square, and we'll see why when we get over to Godot. So I'm going to do 64 by 64. And then once you type in these numbers, don't forget to click resize, because if I just do this and then leave this area, it's not going to do anything. So you have to click the resize button. And nothing changes because I haven't drawn anything yet, but we can see that it is 64 by 64. Okay. Next, these are all the drawing tools. It's pretty straightforward, honestly. I think you guys will be able to get into it pretty quickly. But I'll just get started with the pen tool. So the pen tool, works how you would expect. You can change the width. And, it's always going to look kind of pixelated. That's what it looks like. So that's just what the art style is going to look like. If you don't like pixel art, that's fine. You can make something else later, but for now, we're just going to get started with this. So I'm going to choose like a middle size here, and I'm going to just make a new frame and delete this. Another thing to look at, so I'm going to draw some trees for my scenery. So I'm just going to draw like a little tree trunk like this. One thing that's nice is you have two colors, and the default is for the second color to be transparent. So if I want to erase something, I can just use the right mouse button and erase something. I'm already like drawing with the mouse instead of the tablet that I got out for this. Okay, so let's draw a little tree branch. I'm not really going to do that good of a job on the art. I just am going to go through it quickly. Another thing to look at with Piskel is that there's a preview square up here. And the default is actually full size, meaning it's zoomed in, meaning it's bigger than what you're actually going to see when you export. So if you want to see what it actually looks like when you export, you're going to want to set this to 1x. So I usually have that on 1x because I don't want to like export it and then be like, why is this so tiny? So I usually set that to 1x. You're going to see what it'll really look like when you export it as an image. All right, so I'm going to draw some tree branches first. I'm going to draw like maybe 4. Just going to keep it simple. Here's another tree branch. And then I'm going to add some leaves in a second. But I'm just going to do these first so I have some variety. And this is just I'm just going to make some really basic scenery. You guys can do, kind of whatever you want for the scenery for the game. We're just going to get started with some trees, something simple. Okay, so then I'm going to go back in and choose a green color for my leaves, something like that. And I'm just going to draw some leaves around here, like that. I don't know. I'm not really thinking that much about it. You guys should spend more time making it look good than what I'm going to do. But here we've got some leaves. Draw some leaves around here. There's also like a fill tool, so I could probably do this faster if I draw like a little circle and then do the fill. And there are key commands for all this stuff. So if I hit P, I'll get the pencil. And if I hit B, I'll get the bucket fill. So you can speed up your workflow a little bit with stuff like that. So I'll draw like a nice big guy there. And one over here. And I have one more. Again, you don't have to do anything specific. I'm just kind of doing something that I can do quickly. Okay, so we've got some trees. So that's looking pretty good. You could do as many frames as you want to make more scenery, but you can also keep it simple. It kind of depends on the aesthetic of the game you want to make. I'll go over a couple more tools that are useful real quick, but then we will export it. So one tool that's really useful is this Paint All Pixels tool. If you decide you don't really like that green color, or maybe I want something other than the black color for my tree. Oh, did I skip a branch? I'm just gonna delete that. So like here's a good example where I have a bunch of different black areas, but they're not connected. So I can't fill them all at the same time with the regular bucket, but I can with the Paint All Pixels. So let's say I want it to be like kind of brown. I can use the Paint All Pixels tool, and it'll fill all the pixels that have the same color. And I can also do this across frames, so I can really quickly update the whole animation. So if I do shift, it applies to all frames. So if I hold shift, well actually I have to make sure I'm clicking the right color, so let's undo that. If I hold shift and click this black color, now all my frames fill in with that new color. So that's a really useful tool. There's some other useful tools, but we'll keep it short for now. Another thing that is useful to do before I export is I can center everything. So in this transform menu down here, there's some useful stuff. I can flip a frame this way. I can rotate the frame. But what I really want to do is center these trees, so it'll make it easier to design later. So I'm just going to center all of these guys in the middle of the frame. You can also crop the sprite. We don't really need to do that for now, but that's another option. Okay, so now I'm ready to export. So I do want to save the art. I don't want to just like completely lose this original art. So the first thing I'm going to do is save this as trees. And then I'll save the Piskel file. So the Piskel file is sort of like the PSD file. It's the original file with the edits. So I can't use it in the game, but I can load it into Piskel later to keep editing it. So let's put this in my game folder. So I made a new game folder for Godot in my class folder. Godot is the name of the engine that we're going to be using. So it's just Godot. I'm going to make a new folder in here called art, and I'm going to put my Piskel file in there. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to export the file. So what I want to do is export a sprite sheet. So when I go to the export menu, there's a few different options. And the one that we want to do for Godot is the PNG option, which exports a sprite sheet. You can scale it up. We don't really need to do that, but you might want to scale it up. So if you scale it up, it'll export it at a higher resolution, but it's not going to change the image data. So I'm going to download this sprite sheet, and it'll go into your downloads folder if you're using it on the web. And this is what the sprite sheet looks like. It's just an image with our 4 sprites, our 4 frames, all organized in a nice little grid. And game engines know how to use the sprite sheet to break it up into separate images. So we'll go over that in the second part of class. And this is just like a more efficient way to save our images. I can add 60 sprites if I want, and it'll still just be one image. So that's good. It's only 2 kilobytes, which is really good. If you export something and it's like 10 megabytes or greater, that's a sign that it's too big. So that's a very, very general rule of thumb. But when we're working with pixel art, the size of the art should be pretty small. So 2 kilobytes is pretty normal. If it's over, so you guys know the order of the file sizes, or no? Maybe. Let's go over it real quick. Okay. So the smallest piece of data on a computer is 1 byte. This is either a 0 or a 1. That's all it is. It's just one switch. Okay. Or no, that's a bit. Sorry. That's 1 bit. Okay. 1 byte is 8 bits. Okay, so that's 8 little switches, 0 or 1. So that's a little bit more information. Most files that we use are going to be in the kilobyte range, KB, which means 1,000 bytes. So that sounds like a lot of information, but 2 kilobytes is not that much information for what we have these days on our computers. So kilobytes is 1,000 bytes. Kilo is like a kilogram or a kilometer. It's 1,000 of whatever the unit is. Megabyte is 1,000 kilobytes. So megabyte is really, really big. Most files that you use on your computer, like a MP3 for a song, is going to be like 3 megabytes, something like that. So that's like a lot of information. A gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. That's really, really big. If anything in your Godot project is a gigabyte, you're doing something wrong, and we need to, make sure, we need to figure out what happened. That's not crazy if you're making a 3D game, but, that's obviously not what we're doing right now. We're doing 2D. So for 2D assets, everything should be in the kilobyte range. Let's say for 2D assets, things should be from like 1 to maybe at the most like 300K. If it's above that, then we might want to look at what your setup looks like. Okay, so definitely over 10 megabytes is not good. For art, for music, that might be fine. It kind of depends on the situation. But if you see anything that's that big when you export it, there's probably something that we need to look at. We need our art to be really small so that the game will run really fast, because it's processing all this information throughout every frame. Okay. All right, so we've exported our trees. Let's make sure we have that in our project folder. I'll probably move this later, but I'm just going to put it in my Godot folder for now. And now we're going to make a character design. So I'm going to click Create Sprite. And I'm going to do this really, really simple and fast. So this isn't the best example of how it should be done, but I'm just going to go over the basic of what we need. For our character, for our 2D game, we just need a few basic animations. We need an idle animation. We need a walking animation. We need a jumping animation, and we may or may not need a projectile like throwing or shooting animation. Depends on how far we get. I'm going to start with idle and walk, and we'll add the other ones later. So for the idle animation, you could just have 1 frame, but it may look kind of static. So we might want to add a couple frames. I'm just going to design a little character real quick. I usually start with like a rectangle to get the size of the character I want. And then I'm going to center it. We really need our character centered in the middle of our art for the art to look good when we put it into the game. And we also need to remember that everything is happening in place. So our character walks in place, our character jumps in place, it attacks in place. Everything happens with the characters in the center of the frame. If you move the character around in the frame, it's going to look really janky when you put it in the game engine. You'll see why in the second part of class, but you want everything to be centered and the same size. You might want your game to look janky, but we're going to work on having the game not look janky first. We're not going to assume that we want really janky looking games. So I'm going to put a little frame here, turn on this onion skin, and just draw a character. So I'm just going to choose a color, and I'm going to draw like a little cat character with some little ears. And I'm going to fill this in with my bucket. And I'll get a different color, maybe like something like that, and draw a couple eyes so they nice and high contrast so it stands out. And that's all I really need. I'm gonna keep it super simple. I'm gonna add some feet so I can animate it walking. So I'm gonna, there's also a color palette down here which is really useful because it gives your colors numbers. So if I want to get that bluish color back, I just hit 3. And I'm just gonna draw some feet down here. It's not exactly what I wanted. So I'll just draw some feet. I want them to be very simple. Okay. That kind of looks good. I don't know. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Okay. So then I'm going to delete the frame because I don't need to export that. Or you could keep it if you want it there, but now I've got the basic design. And I'm not going to really spend that much time on this. I'm just going to duplicate this twice. And then I'm going to use the selection tool here and just move the feet for the walking animation. So I'm going to, oh, I have to, whoops. Okay, I'm going to use the selection and then I just move it up like that. Oh no, I can move the selection up. Okay, maybe this doesn't work how I thought it would. Maybe if I cut and then move up, there we go, and paste. Okay, so that's gonna be, uh-oh. Okay, so I need to select and cut and then move the selection up and paste. Okay, so that's the first frame of the walking, or actually I did that on the second frame, I'll put that up. So then for this one, I'll grab the selection tool again, grab this guy, Command X to cut, and Command V to paste. Okay, so now I've got a really, really simple walking animation, and I've got my idle animation. So I'm doing like the most bare bones possible version of this. You guys can do something more complex if you want to, but it's really up to you. One thing actually to keep in mind that I kind of wasn't really thinking about that I should have done better is that the character in the game does have a direction. The character by default is like pointing to the right. So you might want to indicate that somehow, but you'll see how it looks when we put it in the game engine. So we might want some sort of right facingness to the character. Maybe if I just flip, maybe what I can do is just flip the feet. No, I don't want to flip the whole thing. Can I flip a selection? I don't think I've done this before. I'll just redraw it. So let's just X. Okay, I'm just gonna X out these feet. And maybe what I'll do is just copy this foot. So I'll make a selection, copy and paste. Okay, there we go. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll copy and then paste this guy up like that. And this one, I'm gonna copy and paste and it'll go down. Okay. It's moving over a little bit. Okay. It would probably just be easier to draw this. I don't know why I'm copying and pasting. I'm just making it worse somehow. Okay, I'll fix this later. I'm just gonna go over exporting it. Yeah. What? Yeah. You can change it in the code, but that's the default. So I'll talk about that in the second part of class. So you can change stuff in the code if you want to, but if you don't want to have to change the code, if you just want it to work, it should be facing to the right. Yeah. Somehow I ended up with a weird looking Oh, you know what I'll do is I'll just delete this one. Oh, I think I added too much to this foot. Okay. So I'm just going to duplicate this, try it one more time. Let's move this guy up. So I'm going to cut, move up, paste, and then do this over here. Cut, move up, paste. Okay, there we go. All right. Anyway, this is my really, really simple, stupid character animation. I'm really spending not very much time on this because it's just a demo, but you guys can, spend a little bit more time working on your character. But what I really need to do is export. So I'm going to save my character first. I'm just going to call this title character and save as a Piskel. And then I'm going to export. So again, I just want to export a sprite sheet. I'm not going to scale it up, although I drew this by accident 32 by 32, so I actually am going to scale it up. I forgot to change the size on this. I do want it to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to scale it up by 2 and then download it. Again, this really just depends on the aesthetic that you want for the game. It doesn't actually matter how big or small your designs are. You're going to eventually have to change stuff and make adjustments. So, don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. Okay, so I'm gonna put these guys in my project folder. So I'm gonna put this in Godot, and I'm gonna put the Piskel file in the art folder, and I'm gonna leave these two PNGs here. So I've got my character art and my trees. And in the second part of class, we're going to add these into the Godot engine and just create our first simple little scene. For now, I'm going to stop here, and we can use the rest of this period to work on the art. So you guys can get started. You need 2 things, the scenery and the character. It doesn't have to be completely finished. You're going to be able to update it later. So, just get something started, and then however far you get, make sure to export a couple of sprite sheets before we start working with Godot, so you'll have something to plug in there. Yep. Files? Technically, you don't have to. For me, it's nice to keep them organized. But you could have them in the same file if you wanted to. Yeah. Sorry? No, it should be like, I think 32 by 32 is a little small, so I recommend 64 by 64. But if you want to go bigger, you can. That's fine.
Generally keep it by the 16s. So if you're gonna make it bigger, add 16 to make it bigger.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll notice that the defaults are in what's called powers of 2. And the reason for that is because, as we talked about before, there's 2 values in a bit. And so if you look at the powers of 2, this is a fun quick math lesson. So if a bit has 2 values, 0 or 1, then we multiply that by 2, we get 4 values. By 2 we get 8. By 2 we get 16. By 2 we get 32, 64, 128. And 256. So those numbers probably seem maybe familiar. Those are the powers of 2, and they're just faster for the computer to read. So that's why you'll see those values used a lot. 512, 1024. You'll see a lot of images for games are set to these resolutions. Not 2 and 4, but these guys. Yeah.
Does the Godot folder make itself? When you download Godot, or you have to make it yourself?
We're gonna go over that later, but yeah, we'll cover that.